Hello everyone and welcome back to Alternative Apex Project Pinnacle here for round 10 of the 2026 Formula 1 season. We are here for the first of two Grand Prix to take place in the United States of America. First up we have US Grand Prix East here at Watkins Glen International Raceway, and we have just a quarter of the season left ahead of us, including this race here today. Three races, three Grand Prix that could prove critical for this Drivers' Championship outcome, and for the first time since, well, before this season started, it is not George Russell that leads the Drivers' Championship. It is Andrea Kimi Antonelli, albeit by only 3 points over his teammate George Russell. Lando Norris and Carlos Sainz both still hanging into this title fight as well, although they are much further back. Norris is currently sitting 24 points off the lead, which of course is less than one race victory, but with just 3 races left and 2 drivers both with a decent margin over him, he's going to need a lot of luck to get back into this title fight. Perhaps McLaren, if they can find some form, he could be able to reel in that gap, but it's going to take a lot of effort from him and perhaps some good fortune over these coming races. Coming into this Grand Prix, we had some big contract news and a bit of a surprise, I believe it's fair to say. Charles Leclerc has announced a 3-year contract with Aston Martin. Incredible, he has left Ferrari, the man that is seen as the future of the Scuderia and has been the star of the Scuderia for so many years now. He is leaving them. With all the turmoil we have seen this year, perhaps it is not as big a surprise as it could have been, but nonetheless, Charles Leclerc will be leaving Ferrari at the end of the 2026 season, and he's going to Aston Martin Honda. He will be replacing the retiring Fernando Alonso, and it has also been confirmed he'll be partnering Lance Stroll at that team, so Stroll's seat is still safe at his father's team. No surprise there. And that's an interesting decision from Aston Martin to sign Charles Leclerc, because not only, of course, is that a huge pull to get him away from Ferrari and into a team which looks as though it is very much on the up at the moment with Adrian Newey at the helm now, it also means that Max Verstappen is not going to Aston Martin, and that was seen by many as the obvious case, and how things would play out. Well, it was clear. It was going to be Verstappen to Aston Martin. He was clear that he didn't want to stay with Red Bull anymore with all the lack of performance they've had. They haven't even had a podium yet this season. Yet, here we are. Verstappen is not going to be driving for Aston Martin next year. Both seats have been taken, which means that there's not many options left on the cards for Max Verstappen. Of course, there'd be the perhaps surprising decision for him to move to Ferrari, which wouldn't make a huge amount of sense considering, well, they're in a bit of a mess at the moment. There's then, of course, the option that he stays at Red Bull, who, as I said, they haven't had a podium this season. He's clearly not happy at that team and wants to move out of them. Red Bull is understood to be looking at options elsewhere already to prepare for his leave, and expecting him to be gone by the end of the season. Of course, they don't want him to go, but it is understood within the team at least that the chances are he won't be around next season, which then only really leads to one possible outcome, which is Mercedes. And Toto Wolff hasn't really been too, what's the term I should use, too emphatic in his denial of this particular rumour. It's back once again for yet another year in Formula 1. Max Verstappen to Mercedes rumours are swirling, despite Mercedes being in a really strong position. Their 2 drivers are first and second in the Drivers' Championship. They're leading comfortably in the Constructors. And yet Verstappen is rumoured to be heading there for next year, with even some reports suggesting that it would be George Russell that would leave the team, not his teammate Antonelli. Antonelli, despite being, well, the championship leader now, is a younger driver than Russell and hasn't been seen as perhaps the more lead driver and more likely to stay with the team. You'd imagine he'd be moved to another junior team in the meantime if Verstappen were to come in. But with how well Antonelli's performed in the recent races, it seems as though Toto Wolff's mind has been made up. Whilst Russell has had a mid-season slump in form, that appears to be enough for Toto Wolff to say, you know what, Max Verstappen's back on the table here to partner Antonelli for next year. And if that ends up being the outcome, that would be huge for this season and for next year, because a championship contender being fired, essentially, during the season, not going to be renewed at their team for next year, will be a massive impact on George Russell for this season. Could knock his confidence. Alternatively, it could see him have a bit of a rise within the team and feel as though he's got a point to prove, in which case maybe he would be able to bounce back out of this slump he's had recently. but it's huge for a team like that, and it would also put George Russell on the market, a driver who is in the title fight. I don't need to repeat myself. He is contending for this season's championship. If he ends up on the market, that would be a bombshell and a half, and that would lead teams like Red Bull, Ferrari, maybe even Williams and others all looking to try and get his signature late on in the off-season, when many of these teams already had their plans in place for the next season. It's also worth noting at the moment, Leclerc leaving Ferrari means that with Oliver Bearman coming in to replace Hamilton, there is another seat available at Ferrari. Could that be an option for George Russell? Is he more likely to go to Red Bull? Is he more likely to stay at Mercedes? Is all of this just a rumour to try and get Russell to take a pay cut, or Antonelli to take a pay cut, or some sort of contract manoeuvring from Toto Wolff to put pressure on his drivers and make them feel a little less secure about their futures? Who knows what could be the outcome here? It is understood that Giovinazzi is in talks to drive for Ferrari next year, with Ferrari not believing that any other driver on the current grid is perhaps a safe enough bet to put into the main team, considering Giovinazzi to put in a solid drive in the Italian Grand Prix. Of course, did have that incident with his teammate in that race. But having an Italian driving for Ferrari could well be an outcome Ferrari would quite like, especially if they do think Bearman is their lead driver. So potentially that's another outcome. We could see Giovinazzi back in Formula 1 full-time after his stint in the World Endurance Championship. So many things are being opened up by the contract news that we have had. And now we wait. Charles Leclerc, he's going to Aston Martin. But where is Max Verstappen going? Who are Ferrari going to put in that second car? And is George Russell safe? Is a championship contender at risk of losing their seat? If he wins this championship, it would be the first time since 1996, when Damon Hill won the championship Williams, despite being fired midway through the season, to be replaced by Heinz-Harald Frentzen. It would be an incredible turn of events, and you have to say, at least in credit here to George Russell, Max Verstappen's a different driver to Heinz-Harald Frentzen is. But still, it is a huge, huge question mark on the rest of this season now, and who knows what may be happening. But after, well, a large amount of time spent on what's going to be happening for next season, let's crack into it. Let's get up to speed here. Let's see how the field lines up for the first sprint race here at Watkins Glen Raceway. Now, for this weekend's US Grand Prix East, we have 3 wildcard entries, but none of them in sprint race number 1. At the back for sprint race number 1, we have Franco Colapinto for Alpine, lining up just behind his teammate Pierre Gasly. Another disappointing one-lap pace for Alpine. Gabriel Bortoleto just ahead of him on those Michelin tyres, with Esteban Ocon for Haas with his Goodyears, giving it a bit of a boost over that one-lap performance. Valtteri Bottas in the Cadillac Ferrari, that lines up just behind the Ferrari in Lewis Hamilton, disappointing from the Scuderia here in one-lap pace. We see Arvid Lindblad very strong for him on Friday. He splits the 2 Ferraris in this first sprint race, with Lance Stroll just ahead of Charles Leclerc there, the Canadian driver, as close to home as he will be getting this season. Ahead of him, Antonelli there lining up in the 4th position on the grid. Fernando Alonso lines up 3rd in an improved Aston Martin once again. George Russell on the front row there, 2nd in the championship, 2nd on the grid for this first sprint race, but on pole position, the man 3rd in the championship and in need of some good point-scoring results. It is Lando Norris. The revs rise then as the lights come on, and we are racing, and we're underway here for the first sprint race at Watkins Glen Raceway. It's Norris that will lead us into turn number 1 for the first time. Russell slotting into 2nd place there, Alonso a little bit wide over the curbs. That could give an opportunity for Antonelli to slip down his inside as they head up into the S's, and indeed Antonelli makes that pass and can keep the pressure on his teammate, who meanwhile is putting a little bit of pressure on Lando Norris for the lead in this first sprint race, of course. Pole position available to the winner of this one, and only the top 10 will qualify for the Grand Prix here. Gasly moving up a spot, he's into 11th position now, as we see Bortoleto on his tail. Gasly making a bold move in to the bus stop chicane there, going to get wheel-to-wheel with Esteban Ocon this for the final qualifying spot, and he will make the move stick there. The Alpines both making up a little bit of ground on this opening lap there. Colapinto also making his way past Bortoleto, but up at the head of the field it is Norris that leads the way, ahead of George Russell, and Andrea Antonelli, the championship leader, sits 3rd at the moment now, as we see Leclerc feeling the pressure from Lance Stroll. The Ferrari got a better start than the Aston Martin, but it seems the Aston Martin just does have a little bit more race pace here as they head towards the bus stop chicane. Stroll looks to the inside here. Will he be able to outbrake the Ferrari? Leclerc brave on the turn in there. Stroll carries a lot of corner speed but goes a touch wide, and that is going to hand the position back to Charles Leclerc. Leclerc up into 5th position once more here for a top 10 qualifying position there if he does maintain that position. Lance Stroll currently on course for an 11th place start if he is unable to move from there. At the back end of the field here, we've got Lindblad with a bit of a train going on at the moment. Bottas going to try and find his way past down the inside of the Racing Bulls KTM. The Cadillac moves up into 8th position. More comfortable spot for him if he is able to stay there. Gasly still holding on to that final qualifying spot. There's a couple of cars towards the back of the field, a little bit off the pace there. Colapinto nowhere to be seen. Perhaps more issues for the Alpine team, as at the head of the field it is going to be Lando Norris that weaves his way through the final few corners for the final time. And in sprint race number 1, it is going to be pole position for Lando Norris. McLaren are back in form here, and could Norris be the problem in this title fight for Mercedes? He takes pole here ahead of the 2 Mercedes cars behind him. Good pace from the McLaren car there. Behind throughout the rest of the field, we see that all pretty much single file here. Hamilton has been passed by Bottas on this final lap. Bottas showing very impressive pace here for Cadillac in their home event. Hamilton in 8th spot at the moment. Behind him, Arvid Lindblad, Pierre Gasly still in that final spot, and it's close between the 2 Frenchmen there. Ocon on his tail towards the line. It's going to be side by side, but Gasly will hold on to the final qualifying position there from sprint race number 1. Lando Norris, though, he could be the stone in the shoe of Mercedes this weekend, and potentially in this season's championship. He takes pole position from sprint race number 1. Behind him, George Russell, not quite able to match the pace of the McLaren there. Antonelli just behind him as well. Not a bad qualifying position for Antonelli. Keeps himself very much on the tail of his teammate, and potentially able to get a jump ahead of him in the Grand Prix. Alonso behind them for Aston Martin. Charles Leclerc for Ferrari in 5th position. Behind the Ferrari, we see his teammate for next year, Lance Stroll. Valtteri Bottas with a strong drive in that sprint race to come home in 7th spot. Lewis Hamilton 8th there, with just a few Grand Prix left in his career. At least he is qualified for this one. Arvid Lindblad in 9th spot. He could be a potential replacement for Max Verstappen if Verstappen does decide to move away from Red Bull at the end of this season, with Pierre Gasly taking the final qualifying in spot. Esteban Ocon, Gabriel Bortoleto and Franco Colapinto all miss out on qualifying, so Haas and Audi have their work cut out if they want to get some cars in the field for this US Grand Prix East. Now it is time to turn our attention to the second of the sprint races here to decide the even-numbered grid positions. In the rear of the field, we have Haas's wildcard entry. It is the Japanese driver Ritomo Miata. He lines up just behind the Audi of Nico Hülkenberg. Then we have Cadillac's wildcard entry. It is Colton Herta there for the American squad, with Liam Lawson lining up just ahead of him there in the starting grid. Oliver Behrman looking to try and get a Haas car on the grid for this Grand Prix. He lines up just behind Sergio Perez there, looking to join his teammate in this race. Alexander Albon with a disappointing performance in 1-lap qualifying, although perhaps it was the Williams car, as his teammate Carlos Sainz is just a spot ahead of him. The highest of the wildcard entries in this sprint race, it is Conor Zilic, the young Red Bull back driver over in NASCAR, will be making an appearance here today. He's just 1 spot behind his teammate Isaac Hadjar, who in turn is just 1 spot behind his teammate Max Verstappen. All 3 Red Bull Fords together on the starting grid, but Oscar Piastri will be leading us away here for the second sprint race, looking to make it a McLaren front row lock. The revs rise then as the lights come on, and we are racing, and we're underway for the second sprint race of the day, and it's Piastri here that will lead us down towards turn number 1, looking to repeat what his teammate did, and indeed he will. He leads us through the first corner a little bit wide, and it is going to be Verstappen on his tail as we see Hadjar and Zilic doing battle behind them as they come up and through the S's. The rest of the field as well, awfully close to each other, the 2 Williams cars. They're battling away with the Haas of Oliver Behrman. He's to the inside and clears Carlos Sainz in the run towards the chicane. As up at the front, it is Piastri who just leads ahead of Max Verstappen. It is the Dutchman trying to stay on the tail here, looking for his first Grand Prix podium of the season. He can get into the first 2 rows of the grid. That would be a very good sign for the Red Bull driver. As we see further back in the field, Herta has had a poor start. Miata has jumped ahead of him here. The 2 wildcard entries that started towards the back of the field have now dropped all the way to the back of the field, with no one behind them anymore, as Piastri leads us down into the long part of this Grand Prix loop. As we see Carlos Sainz now immediately trying to fight back on Oliver Behrman here. The Williams is in theory a much better car, much more power in the back of that one. The Mercedes power unit provides, and he will move into 6th position there, ahead of the Haas of Oliver Behrman, although Behrman's still in position to qualify for this Grand Prix, as Hadjar now is feeling the pressure from his teammate for the weekend. It's Conor Zilic to the inside here, the American superstar to the inside of the bus stop. Can he hold on to the move? Yes, he can. What a pass from Conor Zilic. Lovely stuff, and into 3rd position there, ahead of the Frenchman, Isaac Hadjar, dropping back, and that is not a good sign for Isaac Hadjar and his future at Red Bull. all we have to say. Despite a strong season so far, got to be getting past by the wildcard entry, albeit one as highly rated as Connor Zilic there. As we see another driver with a Ford power engine, power unit in the back of their car. It is Liam Lawson through and past Sergio Perez there. That is for 8th spot. That takes him clear of the sort of risky zone that you find in that 9th place battle. But up at the head of the field, it is Oscar Piastri, will make it a McLaren front row lockout here. But look at the pace from Red Bull Ford here in Ford's home Grand Prix. They're not looking too bad, are they? It's going to be Piastri that comes off for the final corner, and towards the line, it's Piastri who's going to win sprint race number 2. Max Verstappen in 2nd place, and Connor Zilic, the young American superstar, will come home in 3rd position there as well. Towards the battle for the final qualifying in spots. Miata has jumped back out of Hulkenberg here, and he's on the tail of Perez for that final spot here. Can he get his Haas into the Grand Prix? It's going to be oh so close as he comes off the final corner, but it's going to be Perez that has it. It's Liam Lawson in 8th, Perez 9th, Miata, sadly for him, just misses out on a Grand Prix debut there for the Haas team. A man who is seen as one of the highly rated Japanese prospects that could well be the replacement for Ben next year at that team. There's a few in the mix. Miata, the top one at the moment, hence why he got this wildcard outing. So McLaren locking out the front row here of the grid for Watkins Glen Raceway. So far, pole position has converted in both of the sprint races, as has 2nd place. So the front row looking pretty good and a safe place to be for the McLaren drivers, albeit with 2 hungry Mercedes and then 3 hungry Red Bulls all on their tail. As mentioned there, Verstappen 2nd in that sprint race with Connor Zilic. If you don't know Connor Zilic, he is a young American driver who has been racing, started off in go-karts, moved into sort of more endurance racing style of thing, Trans Am, I believe he raced in, before then moving over to NASCAR, where he had a superstar rookie season in the 2nd tier of NASCAR before getting promoted straight up to the Cup Series. It's currently his 1st year in the Cup Series, but Red Bull love the kid, and that is why he's driving their car here this weekend, and boy, it's paying off so far with his 3rd place in that sprint race ahead of Isaac Hadjar. Behind them, the 2 Williams cars there, with Alexander Albon just beating his teammate Carlos Sainz. Oliver Behrman means that Haas do have a car in the field. Liam Lawson 8th spot means both Racing Bull KTMs are in the field, with Sergio Perez making it both Cadillacs in the field as well. No cars from Audi will be in this Grand Prix. Disappointment from Nico Hulkenberg, as he once again finds himself outside of the starting grid for Sunday's Grand Prix. With 2 sprint races in the pocket, let's move on then to the Grand Prix. And at the back of the field is the Alpine of Pierre Gasly, who just snuck through from the 1st sprint race. Then we see another driver that just snuck out of the sprint race. It is Sergio Perez there for the Cadillac team. Then we see Arvid Lindblad for Red Bull Racing Bulls KTM, just behind his teammate Liam Lawson there. Both of them looking to try and score some more points for that team in their battle at the back end of the constructors. Lewis Hamilton behind his replacement for next season. Oliver Behrman there for Haas, just ahead of him. Valtteri Bottas, a former teammate of Lewis Hamilton, and looking to become a bit of a repeat point scorer here for Cadillac. He lines up just behind the Williams of Carlos Sainz. Lance Stroll in an improved Aston Martin, there just ahead of the Williams. Then we see another Williams in Alexander Albon. Charles Leclerc, the lead Ferrari on the starting grid for the Grand Prix, with Isaac Hadjar for Red Bull lining up in the 8th position. 7th spot goes to the Aston Martin of Fernando Alonso, with just 3 Grand Prix left in his career. On the other end of the spectrum, we have Connor Zilic looking to make his 1st Grand Prix start there. He'll be lining up in 6th spot, just behind the championship leader, Andrea Kimi Antonelli in 5th. 4th place goes to Max Verstappen, 3rd to George Russell. Talks between those 2 teams could be interesting in the coming weeks. We have on the front row, Oscar Piastri lining up 2nd, and from pole position looking for his 1st win of the season, it is the reigning champion, Lando Norris. The revs rise then as the lights come on. And we are racing, and we're underway for the US Grand Prix East here at Watkins Glen International into turn number 1 for the first time. Piastri sticking his nose to the inside. He will get a bit of a wheel alongside his teammate, and he will take the lead. It's up into 1st place for Oscar Piastri. Immediately Norris on the back foot, having to defend from the Mercedes of George Russell, who's sweeping around him in the S's, but Norris fighting back. They bang wheels at the top of the hill, and now towards the bus stop chicane. They continue to run side by side. Norris squeezed a little bit onto the grass there, but by his good friend George Russell as they head to the bus stop here. Can Norris hold on with the inside line for the second apex? George Russell, though, is gonna make the move stick. He's up into second position. Norris drops into third. Verstappen holds on to fourth. Antonelli there in fifth position. Carlos Sainz battling away with the Aston Martin. A little bit of a moment there for that Williams driver, as we see Albon, meanwhile, further behind. He's had a poor start with Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc in that battle as well for Ferrari. Behrman in 14th spot at the moment. Valtteri Bottas in the 15th position. As we look back up towards the top 5 positions, it is Oscar Piastri in the lead of this race and looking to pull away already here, as we see George Russell trying to hold on to that position from Lando Norris, who in turn is having to worry about the cars behind him here. This battle pack is raging at the moment, as down the inside goes the championship leader Andrea Kimi. Antonelli will make the move on Max Verstappen without the power of Mercedes behind him, unable to resist that manoeuvre, as Fernando Alonso is on the tail of Conor Zilic. These two drivers opposite ends of the age spectrum here in a Formula 1. Through the final corner here, will Alonso get a run here on Conor Zilic? The Honda engine expected to have a little bit more run than the Ford as they head towards turn number 1 here, and Ford, despite it being their home race, appear to have no more power than they usually do here. A little bit of rubbing of wheels there, but it's Alonso that makes the move stick. Up into 6th position there is now Carlos Sainz, will be the next to line up the rookie Conor Zilic, who is perhaps starting to feel the pressure here in his first Grand Prix and is dropping just a bit here as Alonso looks at making a move on Max Verstappen, doesn't go for it, as meanwhile Conor Zilic is fending off Carlos Sainz, but it's not looking like he's going to be able to do much there. The Mercedes-powered Williams moves up into 7th position there, and Zilic drops back into 8th spot. Behind then, Alexander Albon there is battling away with Isaac Hadjar, who's had a poor start there. Now dropped back into 12th position behind Lance Stroll, although trying to keep in the fight as they come up the hill, unable to do so here. As Fernando Alonso looking to try and make another spot in this race. Verstappen, despite strong performance over one lap and in the sprint race, he is struggling here in the Grand Prix. He is on the tail of his rivals, and he just can't quite stay with them as Alonso goes around the outside of the bus stop chicane. But look at that from Verstappen. Just a reminder that maybe the car isn't the best, but the driver certainly may well be still. He holds on to that 5th position, and Alonso is forced to remain in his position for just a little bit longer here. As at the back of the pack, we've got a battle here. The two Racing Bull KTMs trying to take this position away from the Alpine of Pierre Gasly. Gasly ahead of them at the moment, should have a bit more horsepower as they head into the bus stop chicane. Lawson going for the move there. He's going to go down the inside of not just his teammate, but now he's going to make the pass stick on Pierre Gasly as well, with news reporting recently that KTM will not be sticking around with the Racing Bulls team for next year. It's a nice showing there for at least now that the Racing Bulls KTMs are making some moves out on the racetrack, albeit, well, how long will that last, as now here comes Pierre Gasly to the inside of turn number 1 there. And it's the Alpine back up into the final points paying position. It's been a while since Alpine scored points. In fact, I don't believe they scored points since their home Grand Prix at Le Mans there. And Gasly is really having to fight for this position at the moment as they go straight up the hill. Lawson close behind the slipstream, Lindblad, and then Bottas trying to stay in this fight as well, with the Cadillac of Valtteri Bottas just behind him, and Sergio Perez not far behind him either, as the two KTMs look like they're going to do battle here, as it's Lindblad's turn this time to go flying down the inside. And just like last lap, it's a Racing Bulls making a double overtake into the bus stop chicane. Lovely stuff there. Arvid Lindblad up into the final points position now, as Gasly been run a little bit wide, and that's going to lose him the position to Liam Lawson as well there. So Racing Bulls are confirming their spot there at the back end of the points-paying positions. And at the head of the field, a man who has gone untroubled today. McLaren and Oscar Piastri come through the final couple of corners for the final time. It's been a dominant drive from the Australian. This is what we've been waiting to see from the McLaren team. An incredible drive. It's Oscar Piastri from second on the grid to first at the checkered flag. Oscar Piastri wins the US Grand Prix East ahead of George Russell, who will take back the championship lead. Lando Norris completing the podium there for McLaren. A strong showing for the team in Papaya. I think after Norris took pole position, and considering the season Piastri's had so far, many expected Norris to be the first man for McLaren this season to take a Grand Prix victory, but in the end, wasn't to be. It is Oscar Piastri, the man that last year showed off what he could do in Formula 1, is back and again performing to a very high standard, wins this Grand Prix here at Watkins Glen. Norris, third place, looked like he just got stuck behind George Russell. That poor Turn 1 from Lando Norris. That's where it all went wrong, and well, we've heard that story before, haven't we? Behind them, of course, Antonelli in 4th spot. Good job from him, just a damage limitation, really. The Mercedes didn't quite have the pace of the McLaren, and unlike his teammate, wasn't able to get ahead of one at the start. Behind him, Max Verstappen, he had a solid drive there, managing to fend off Fernando Alonso. Carlos Sainz then, ahead of Conor Zilic on his Grand Prix debut, coming home in 8th position there, long clear of his teammate Isaac Hadjar, who only finished in 11th spot. Between them, Stroll and Leclerc, teammates for next year at the Aston Martin team. Leclerc will be liking, though, what he sees from that Aston Martin car, considering Alonso was way up the road from Leclerc in that Grand Prix Albon. Takes the fine position in the top 12, with Lewis Hamilton in 13th spot ahead of his replacement for next year, Oliver Behrman, with Arthur Lindblad just holding on to the final points-paying position in that Grand Prix. Sergio Perez and Pierre Gasly got by Lawson in the dying stages of that Grand Prix, with Valtteri Bottas bringing home the final position in this race. As we turn our attention to the Drivers' Championship, with just 2 races left in this season, it is George Russell that retakes the championship lead now by 4 points over his teammate Antonelli. Lando Norris now sits just 26 points behind the championship lead, so actually a net loss for the McLaren driver. Piastri climbs up into 4th spot there, as those 4 drivers are all still in this title fight with 50 points still available. That also means that Carlos Sainz is still in the mix, although Alexander Albon is no longer in contention, sitting 6th spot in the championship. Charles Leclerc behind him, ahead of Lance Stroll. Alonso next up, with Max Verstappen just hanging on to that top 10 position for now, ahead of Lewis Hamilton. Isaac Hadjar, they're in 12th spot with Esteban Ocon behind him. Oliver Behrman, 14th there, the 2 Haas cars, similar, or same on points in fact, with Pierre Gasly behind them. Arvid Lindblad, another point to his account there. He is in the 16th spot ahead of Franco Colapinto and Victor Martins, both tied on 11 points so far this season. Behind them, Jack Crawford, 9 points, Conor Zilic, 8 points, Sergio Perez on 6, with Bortoleto, Bottas and Giovinazzi all sitting on 5 points apiece. Sebastian Vettel, the legend that he is, 4-time champion and the wildcard for Audi earlier in the season, still with just 4 points to his name, of course, having done only 1 entry, of course, as wildcards are only allowed. Behind him, Liam Lawson and Leonardo Fornaroli, with Nico Hülkenberg and Yuki Tsunoda bringing up the back end of the championship standings. All drivers that can compete this season and can have scored points have now done so. No new names will be added to that list. Of course, we could have had a possible 33 drivers scoring points, but 4 of the wildcard entries failed to convert their one-off appearances to a top 15 on Grand Prix Sunday. Hence why we have only 29 drivers in the championship standings. Looking over to the constructor standings, Mercedes lead the way now by a similar margin to before, slightly reduced though, of course, with today's disappointing pace compared to the McLaren team. The gap is now around 56 points. Behind them, Williams is looking pretty comfortable for 3rd position now. Aston Martin ahead of Ferrari. Red Bull sitting 6th in a bit of no man's land as well, as are Haas there in the 7th position. Alpine sitting 8th and continuing to just sort of maintain their position at the moment, unless there is sort of a crazy race where Racing Bulls, Cadillac or Audi can score a huge bunch of points. In that battle between Cadillac and Audi, it is still just a point separating those 2 new manufacturers, and it will most likely go all the way down to the final round of the season in the Brazilian Grand Prix. That's all for this week's race. I do hope you all enjoyed it. Next time out, we're staying in the United States, but we're going west. We're going to Willow Springs Raceway. With all the wildcard entries now used up, we'll be just 22 cars attempting to qualify for that one. But the championship fight will, I'm sure, keep us entertained. That's all, though. Thank you very much for watching, and until next week, goodbye.